Hello and a very warm welcome to Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And our guest here in the studio today is somebody who's made a name for himself as a criminal defence lawyer here in Berlin and made an even bigger name in the last few months or so with his brilliant and best-selling collection of stories called Verbrechen. That means crimes. And he is Ferdinand von Schirach.
Hello.
Ferdinand, thank you very, very much for being here today. It's a great pleasure. Ferdinand von Schirach, I'll be very honest with you today. I'm extremely excited. I really loved your book. I've been recommending it to all my friends. What I'd like to know is, how did it come about?
Yes,
when you get invited to dinner, you always get asked two questions. The first is, how can you bring yourself to defend a murderer? And the second is, what's the perfect murder? That's why I wrote this book. Now, when I go to someone's for dinner, I give it to them, and that takes care of all the questions.
Super. I've got a third question then for you that comes in with that. The book is about criminals, it's about crimes, and it's about the mechanisms that lead to those crimes. How much of you is in the book?
Well, of course, I'm always the defense counsel, not the criminal. But once you've been a defense lawyer for a while, what you really understand are the mechanisms. And describing these mechanisms is, of course, somehow also a part of me.
Okay, you're talking, though, very analytically there. You're also a writer. Writers have techniques, and what fascinated me about the book, one thing that fascinated me about this, apart from just the storytelling, which is magnificent, is that from the very first word to the very last word, there's a unity of tone and style. Did you do that deliberately?
To be honest, I can't help it. Perhaps it's a bit like composing. You can hear when a word doesn't fit, even if you're writing it in your head. The same goes for the plot, too. You suddenly realize when something's wrong with the plot.
One of my favourite questions in life, and who better to ask, is the world divided into good people and bad people?
Nein.
No.
No.
That is the answer to your question for all time.
But the world is divided into people who do good things and people who do very bad things.
Yes, but these are basically moral categories. We always have both good and evil within ourselves. It makes no sense to say he is good or he is evil. They're just pigeonholes which you can stuff people into. But you see, most of our actions are both good and bad at the same time. For example, there are people who only do good, but for purely selfish reasons. So are they good or bad? Hard to say. But I think the idea of evil in itself is useless. You can't do anything with it at all. If you read Joachim Fest's book on Hitler, he never says Hitler was evil, that he was a monster or what have you. Instead, he describes the man in detail, almost analyzes him, in fact. And through that, you get an idea of what evil really is. And that's a lot better.
You have people who come to you and they want you to defend them, and they have done appalling, dreadful, atrocious things. Your job might be to ensure that they are not punished for crimes that they have committed. Is that something that you have done? Successfully.
Does that make me a bad person? No, it's simply that although the question is an admissible one, it implies something which shouldn't actually be there. If a court acquits someone of murder, then they weren't a murderer. So I have never defended a murderer who was acquitted. Instead, I was defending someone who was innocent. As you see, I am a lawyer.
We're talking about guilt here as well, innocence and guilt, both in a legal sense and in a moral sense. Guilt is something in Germany that's been a very important category because you mentioned Hitler, and we're going to talk a little bit about your background, obviously. Is Germany today still guilty? Are Germans today still guilty for the terrible crimes committed by the Nazis?
No, I wouldn't say so. Guilt is always a personal matter, but there's also something like a state responsibility for these crimes. And of course, we bear that and will do so, as long as the Federal Republic of Germany exists, even when the people or the state itself can no longer do anything about them. That was a different state and a completely different generation. I last saw my grandfather when I was just 6. I was born long after the war. Of course I do not bear any guilt, and neither does the rest of the population. But responsibility is something else, and we bear that.
So no sense of guilt in that sense. But how do people react to you? How do people react to your name in Germany?
Das ist ganz unterschiedlich.
It varies a lot. It's funny. There were a lot of aristocrats in the resistance, and I was recently in court and the judge said, "Oh, Schirach, your grandfather was in the resistance, wasn't he?" But most people still say, "Yes, that was Peter von Schirach," and then there's some sort of discussion. "My father was also in the Hitler Youth," or something like that.
Is there no point at which a Nazi war criminal can simply become a sad old man or a sad old woman who we leave alone to think his or her thoughts and eventually pass away?
Nein, den Punkt gibt es ganz sicher nicht.
No, certainly not. As long as someone's still alive, you always have to hear what they have to say about events and to pass judgment on them. There's no statute of limitations for murder in Germany. That was a conscious decision to prevent Nazi crimes from lapsing. Also, there are a lot of victims and descendants of victims who really want to know what happened.
Und Nachfahren von Opfern, die wirklich wissen wollen, was passiert ist, und das kann man in einem Gerichtsverfahren.
And you can usually clarify things better in court than in a lecture on history or a book or whatever. But the real problem is that we have a fundamental principle, namely that we don't turn someone into the object of a legal process. We leave him his dignity. And to try someone, even if they're the most terrible murderer, who no longer understands that they're on trial, or who's fatally ill, or who has to be brought into the courtroom on a stretcher or whatever, all that is forbidden in a constitutional state. So the hearings take place between these two poles. It's very difficult for the judges too. You have to weigh everything, although it's basically a good sign when a hearing starts.
Let's move away from questions of guilt and innocence and justice. Let's talk a little bit about the actual motivation for Nazi-era crimes. Your grandfather was responsible, he played a role in the deportation of tens of thousands of Viennese Jews when he was the Gauleiter in Vienna. Yeah. He was sentenced to 20 years at the Nuremberg Tribunal. He said that he believed, he defended what he had done and said it was an active contribution to European culture. You are a writer, you are a man of culture. That must pain you.
Ja, tut es auch.
Yes, it does too. It was really terrible. I thought long and hard about it. Of course, he said that before the Nuremberg trials. During the Nuremberg trials, he did admit his guilt. But you know, the thing is, when you talk about Peter von Schirach, he came from a family where, for centuries, there were books and writers and philosophers and scientists and so on. I've never really understood why he didn't leave the country, at the latest once they'd started burning books. Statements like that naturally pass into the collective memory. They're really awful. And there's no doubt at all, he was guilty.
Talking of books, you're a writer. Give me a sentence. What does it feel like to be a writer?
Well, it's much more relaxing than being a lawyer. When you write, you take responsibility for a story, which is a whole lot easier than being responsible for a human being. Funnily enough, I find it easy, but I believe that with gifts like this, you shouldn't be proud of them, because it's just a gift, nothing more.
Ferdinand, that was a very long sentence. He's a writer, you can see, yeah. Talking of writers, talking of publishing, it's remarkable how hard publishers have to work these days. To get their writers in the spotlight, we have this report.
Germans love to read. 66% of the population picks up a book at least once a month. That's according to a recent poll by the Allensbach Institute. But among the under-30s, it's quite a different picture. The study shows that 35% of this age group has either seldom or never read a book. Publishers know that if they're going to reach the internet generation, they have to use different forms of advertising. Like this commercial for a novel by Christian Kracht. Part political thriller, part science fiction, part historical novel, it imagines a world in which the First World War had a very different outcome. Kracht's Cologne-based publishers Kiepenheuer und Witsch produced the book trailer to promote the book. It was initially screened in movie theatres, but was mainly viewed online. It's still early days for this new approach to commercial advertising in the German book industry. Publishers' research has shown that young people don't read book reviews in a newspaper. They look for new books on the internet. The Bertelsmann publishing house in Berlin has been one of the first to recognize this trend.
The internet is becoming increasingly important, so we wondered how we could make exciting commercials for books on the internet and also attract a younger target audience. It's not enough just to display the cover and add a bit of text. All books have that. You want to promote top titles a bit differently.
A marketing strategy that is becoming an art form in its own right. A prime example is this prize-winning trailer advertising Charles Baudelaire's collection of poems, Les Fleurs du Mal.
Durch die alte Vorstadt streifend, wo an baufälligen Fassaden die Jalousien hängen, hinter denen die Unzucht sich versteckt.
This format, using moving pictures to promote books, is gaining importance. It's a very creative format, and you can do a lot with it. Depending on your budget, you can cover any number of areas. As such, it's the latest trend.
And if things are going to stay that way, then books must be made more appealing to young people.
Well, while we were watching that report, Ferdinand, who's a very old-fashioned fellow, was telling me how much he hates the book business.
Yes, I don't think you can make films from books. The picture should come into your head through the text, not through a film you've already seen. If a book has a butterfly fluttering over some lips or some such nonsense on the cover, it's a bit like stealing from the reader's imagination. I think you just have to read and then the pictures emerge. That's what's great about books. You don't need so much other stuff.
Okay, you're not happy about the book business. You're not really very happy about writers either. I read that you said that the only people who are more vain than defense lawyers, which is what you are primarily, are writers, which is what you are secondarily. That makes you a very vain person.
Yes, that's right, of course. That's exactly how it is. You can't be a defense lawyer without a certain vanity. You're naturally a bit of a diva. You do everything an actor does.
Yes, I was going to ask you, are you a theatrical person? Because you look quite sort of, it's great talking to you, but you're a very analytical person.
Yes, but it's different in court. Here, I can hardly start shouting at you to make you do something now, can I? So, of course, it's a bit theatrical. It'll always be like that. We're talking about laymen, right? You have to persuade them, and you can't persuade most people just through analytical thinking. You have to use warmth, gestures, language, your face. It's all a bit of a show, too.
Okay. Talking about legal matters, I was worried for you while I was reading the book because there's such a thing as confidentiality, and you're describing real cases that you were involved in as a defense lawyer. And sometimes I wonder if I couldn't just find, a local newspaper from the period you're describing and work out what the case was. Did you not go too far?
No. I wrote the book in a way that any external point of reference was altered out of all recognition. I put 2 trainees to work on it. They had a week. They had Google, a whole library, and they couldn't identify the cases, so...
Let me interrupt you, though. Did any of the people who were involved in those cases personally, have they because they must have realised he's got a book out there, have any of them picked up the book and got in touch with you and said, hey, that's me?
Well, of course, I asked the clients most directly affected. But now our main worry is people coming into the office and saying, I've done something really terrible, will I get into your next book?
OK, I want a yes-no answer on this one because we're running out of time before we get to the next sequence here. Is there going to be an English version of the book?
Yeah.
English language? Yeah? Good. That's good news for my friends who don't speak German. I know what I'll be putting under the Christmas tree. Let me just remind you to visit the Talking Germany site on the internet, where you'll also find my blogs on Ferdinand von Schirach and all my other guests.
If you like Talking Germany, you can find out more on the internet. Our host Peter Craven is keeping a blog on the many shows and guests of the series. Find out more about what happens behind the scenes, gossip, experiences, and how the whole show is put together. Just visit blogs.dw-world.de/Talking Germany, and you can tell us what you think about the program there too.
OK, getting towards the end of the show, Ferdinand, where we do our quick-fire quiz, our Talking Germany quiz. Here we go. You are a big reader. What do you prefer to read, thrillers or legal journals?
Thrillers.
Kafka or Dostoevsky?
Kafka, of course.
And I thought that was what you'd say. Punishment or forgiveness?
This is very complicated. I think punishment, yeah.
I thought you were going to say both there. When you meet somebody, can you sense whether they are a criminal or not?
From time to time, I can.
Do you like the good guys more or the bad guys more?
The bad guys.
Are you a bad guy?
Yes, of course.
Oh, the bad guy, Ferdinand von Schirach. He's been a great guest today. I've really enjoyed his company. If you've enjoyed his company as much as I have, come back next week. Cheers.